Hey there, welcome to the Systems Alliance. My name is Jexy. Today I wanted to talk to you about the recent history of loot boxes in video games, what's going on with the legal status of them, seeing as how many countries are now seeing them as an illegal form of gambling. In the instance that we're talking about here, it's a little worse because it's illegal gambling targeted at children. So right as Star Wars Battlefront 2 was being released, and all the controversy surrounding that, Chris Lee, a state representative of Hawaii, came on around November of 2017 and basically started standing up to the loot box illegal gambling practices that the publishers like EA and Activision and others were putting into their games. He's been introducing legislation along with state senators and representatives from across the country from multiple different states, and there seems to be some traction there in terms of defining what gambling actually is, because as is the case with many US laws, they are antiquated and don't reflect the current age that we live in, usually revolving around technology. So in this case, they haven't caught up to video games and how they use their loot box practices. While things may take long here in the United States to get through, in the Netherlands, just last month, in April, they declared certain games and their loot box practices illegal, flat out illegal in their country. And those games consisted of Dota 2, Players Unknown Battlegrounds, Rocket League, and FIFA 18. FIFA, of course, is an EA published game. And this is absolutely huge. And what they said is you actually have to halt the sale of these games in our country. As part of the Netherlands ruling, one of the things that they had said is the risk potential very much depends on how the loot box is offered. The loot boxes with a higher score have integral elements that are similar to slot machines. With these loot boxes, there is very often a higher jackpot where virtual goods are transferable, players can keep opening unlimited loot boxes, multiple visual and sound effects are added, and a near-miss effect is used. According to this tool, the loot boxes with a higher score are comparable with blackjack or roulette in terms of addiction potential. According to this tool, the loot boxes with a lower score are comparable with small-scale bingo in terms of addiction potential. So as you can see, we're not talking about just a game that kids are playing and everything. As I said in my previous video regarding BioWare and EA, there's been players who have been playing Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, which is generally a single-player game, but who got addicted to the loot boxes and ended up shelling out over $16,000. Kid 16, 17 years old, shelling out $16,000 of his own money. And then in other games, kids getting addicted and shelling out even more money, upwards of $40,000 or $50,000. Obviously, in many of these cases, we're talking about their parents' money, and of course, their parents notice too late. And then, you can imagine if you're a kid and all of a sudden you spend 50 grand of your parents' money. That's worse than wrecking their car. At least you have insurance on the car. Here, you're just out that cash, and the only way you can have any hope of redeeming any of that money is if they decide to give it back to you to avoid bad press. Just this month, the Belgian Gaming Commission has ruled on what it considers loot boxes. Some of the games they have been calling out are Overwatch and FIFA 18 once again, and they've put publishers that violate this the most as Valve, Activision Blizzard, and of course Electronic Arts, EA. So the Belgian authorities have come down much harder than their Netherlands counterparts in terms of these loot boxes and what it considers illegal in gambling. Specifically, the games that they targeted were FIFA 18 by EA, Counter-Strike by Valve, and Overwatch by Activision Blizzard. One of the things they said is, the three games noted above must remove their loot boxes or be in criminal violation of the country's gaming legislation. That law carries penalties of up to 800,000 euros, almost $1 million, and 5 years in prison, which can be doubled if minors are involved. Obviously, with gaming, minors are often involved. Joakim says he wants to start a dialogue with loot box providers to see who should take responsibility where. Paying loot boxes are not an innocent part of video games that present themselves as games of skill. Gaming Commission Director Peter Nasons added in a statement, players are tempted and misled, and none of the protective measures for gambling are applied. Obviously, this is something that gamers and people who have been looking into this have known for a long time, and that's why we're trying to do something about it. Now, while EA may have given a little in the Star Wars Battlefront 2 controversy, mostly because Disney had to end up getting involved, and if Disney has to get involved, they really care about their brand, and Disney is not going to let someone like a state representative talk about their game like an online casino targeting children and have Disney be associated with that. Now, Disney, who has their deal with EA to make Star Wars games, is not going to take lightly someone calling them out like this. So they forced EA to remove the loot boxes from the game. EA stock had already tumbled $3 billion of market value just because of this. Never mind Disney not wanting to be associated with it, but of course EA is now fighting back because they are EA. We're going to continue pushing forward with FIFA Ultimate Team. EA CEO Andrew Wilson said during a conference call with industry analysts, "We're always thinking about our players. We're always thinking about how to deliver these types of experiences in a transparent, fun, fair, and balanced way for our players, and we'll continue to work with regulators on that." Obviously, when you hear this, it's kind of a BS response. It's very corporate, very PC. On one end, they have to be. With their legal liability. They don't want to be getting sued for saying something. On the other hand, there's nothing fun about having to work extra hard just to play something in the game that should have come with it in the first place. So in other words, you'd have to play, say, 40 extra hours just to earn your character or something. And there's nothing fair about the only way to being able to do that if you can't put in that time is to use your own money and purchase an advantage over other players, or purchase the ability to play with someone that you were promised that you could when you bought the game, but turns out you couldn't because you had to earn it. It'd be one thing if it were a reasonable level of earning and there was no way else to get that character, but in this case they up the difficulty of earning anything just so you have that much more incentive to purchase it from them. We're working with all of the industry associations globally and with regulators in certain regions and territories, said Wilson. Many of the regulators we've been working with for a long time, and they have evaluated and established that programs like FIFA Ultimate Team are not gambling. The problem with that is who they're referring to is the ESRB. So the ESRB is the one who sets the ratings on the games. It'll have teen, mature. Very few games are adult. Now, one thing that would cause the game to be considered adult would be if it has any gambling in it. And that would make it very difficult to sell in stores because kids are there buying them and they wouldn't be allowed to legally because they are not of age. The problem with this is that the ESRB says loot boxes aren't gambling. Now, why would they say that? Why would the ESRB, some sort of governing body, say that it is not gambling? Well, the reason why they would say loot boxes aren't gambling is, well, let's see who pays their salary. Oh, that's right. EA, Activision, Blizzard. All the gaming companies are the ones who set up this agency in the first place, and they're the ones who pay all of their salaries. So there's a conflict of interest there, because why would they want to bite the hand that feeds them, essentially? They wouldn't. And the reason why this is a big deal now is that governments are forcing them to. And I'm not a fan of big government intervention, more laws, but these companies aren't stopping what they're doing. They know what they're doing is wrong. They have filed for the patents for ways to get people addicted to the gambling mechanisms that they put into the games. It seems blatantly obvious to me that it should be regulated. I'm not saying they should be banned because gambling is still legal. You can still walk into a casino, but you have to have the proper licenses and everything like that. Currently, these games do not have that, and frankly should not be sold to minors if they do have that. So EA has been trying to get around this, and they continue. First, players always receive a specified number of items in every FIFA Ultimate pack. Second, we don't provide or authorize any way to cash out digital items or virtual currency for real-world money, and there's no real-world value assigned to in-game items. The problem with that statement is that it's not true. In fact, they know it's not true because he continues, while we forbid the transfer of items and in-game currency outside of the games, we also actively seek to eliminate that where it's going on in an illegal environment, said Wilson. We work with various regulators on that. You could go to eBay right now, you could go to any of these websites out there, and you could easily trade in real cash for in-game currency to purchase this stuff, vice versa. It's a real system out there. Never mind a game like CSGO, Counter-Strike, in where there's plenty of websites talking about this. In fact, there's plenty of YouTube videos of people just basically pulling the lever of a slot machine and seeing what they get. So in doing his research, the Belgian gaming commissioner, Peter Naessens, noted that the player of these games are tempted and misled, and that none of the protective measures for gambling have been applied. Now that it is clear that children and vulnerable people in particular are exposed to them unprotected, game manufacturers, but also parties such as FIFA, for example, are called upon to halt this practice, he said. EA responded, "We strongly believe that our games are developed and implemented ethically and lawfully around the world, and take these responsibilities very seriously," a spokesman told GamesIndustry.biz. "We care deeply that our players are having a fun and fair experience in all of our games, and take great care to ensure each game is marketed responsibly, included in compliance with regional rating standards." Once again, EA is trying not to get in trouble, but the reality is, if they can't sell their games in Belgium, and they're having trouble selling their games in the Netherlands, and the United States is working towards a solution, Australia is looking into this, the UK is looking into this. When one European country tends to institute a law, the others tend to follow. Obviously, especially for a game like FIFA, and really any of EA's properties, Star Wars, you name it, along with everyone else's, Activision, Blizzard, Valve, this is kind of the start of a huge deal in terms of not being able to sell these types of games with these types of loot boxes and gambling mechanisms in them anymore. This is a huge deal. So the sports gambling world is pretty excited right now because the Supreme Court just ruled last week that states cannot enforce a ban on sports gambling. So now all of a sudden all these states are looking into opening up their doors to new casinos. The value of sports teams are expected to go up because of this. The stocks of casino companies have been rising because of this. There's an article from Bloomberg that kind of details that this may not be the best thing that you would think it would be for a company like EA or Activision, which utilizes these gambling techniques. And some less traditional players also stand to gain, the traditional players being the casinos and the sports teams. As more state legislatures weigh legislation, it could also provide an opening for esports companies. Analysts believe potential winners could include Activision, Blizzard, and even Facebook. The ruling should pave the way for more widespread access to betting on professional esports, says Barclays analyst Ross Sandler in a research note. Mark Cuban, too, invested in a crypto esports betting platform, because how many more buzzy concepts could you cram into one company? But there's also risk to all the attention that online betting is about to get. A slate of new gambling laws are about to wind their way through state houses around the country. Video game publishers like Activision, Blizzard, and Electronic Arts could find some of their businesses curtailed rather than loosened. I'm talking about loot boxes, the industry's magical money machine. If you don't know, loot boxes are a digital contraption that has taken over the video game business. Years ago, video game publishers learned that they could make more money by selling costumes and characters inside games rather than just charging up front for a completed video game. That statement alone right there kind of shows you the sad state that the video game industry is in when everyone knows that you're not even getting a completed product anymore. It's a running joke in the industry. They give you half a game and then charge you more money if you'd like to play the entire game. Over the last few years, that system has grown even more complex. Instead of purchasing an in-game item directly, games will ask you to buy an undisclosed assortment of in-game items and in-game currency. You don't know what you're getting until after you've made the purchase. That means if you have your heart set on a particular item, you might have to buy many of these loot boxes until you land on the item you want, or earn enough in-game currency to buy it. You're definitely rolling the dice over and over again. Just myself, I play Gears of War 4, which is a Microsoft game. The only loot boxes that they have are cosmetic. They don't make you any better at the game. However, there was a character that I wanted, and I refused to pay any money for loot boxes. So what do I have to do? I have to play the game, and playing the game online with friends is fun and whatnot, so I earn that currency no matter what. But there's a limited amount of time that you can actually get any particular characters that they put out. So it makes you want to really get that character when you do have the chance. In this case, the character costs, 2,000 gold. Well, I think I ended up spending over 22,000 gold just to get it, which took weeks and weeks and weeks of play to earn that. Whereas on another turn, because it's basically a slot machine, I ended up finding another character I wanted in the first spin, you could say. So there's definitely an element that if you were the type to be inclined to gamble, you probably would end up forking over the money over and over and over to get that character you want, because you would be frustrated that you kept on getting stuff that you did not want, because they sell you on the rarest item that you can possibly get from a loot box. So when you roll the dice or pull the slot lever or whatever it is that you do to get these items in game, the smallest chance that you have to get anything is for that main thing that you're going after. So it definitely causes a gambling mentality. Moving on the article, loot boxes are a widespread phenomenon that has been embraced by top publishers. Electronic Arts' Star Wars Battlefield 2 faced a wave of backlash after it announced what many gamers considered an overly greedy loot box scheme. EA relented, but not before it received the most downvoted Reddit comment of all time. Opening a loot box has the feel of pulling the lever on a casino slot machine. There's usually a dramatic unveiling animation and a satisfying sound once the crate opens up. One is never enough. There are countless YouTube videos with tens of thousands of views that just show people opening them. It's depressingly satisfying. To critics, this all looks a lot like gambling. And unlike regulated gambling, gaming companies don't have to tell you the odds, and they sell them directly to children. Countries like Belgium and the Netherlands have outlawed loot boxes. Chris Lee, a state representative in Hawaii, has been at the vanguard of the effort in the United States to regulate these random number-generated, powered, money-making digital contraptions. Lee, a gamer himself, introduced legislation in Hawaii that would prohibit companies from putting loot boxes in games that children play. The legislation would require those companies to disclose the odds of winning to adults. Apple has actually forced games that are sold on its store to also disclose the odds, which, as many of you know, mobile games or free-to-play games are the most egregious violators of these loot boxes and these gambling mechanisms. What makes it bad for a company like EA or Activision Blizzard is that they're putting out AAA titles. So you're already paying $60 to $100 for the game. You definitely don't want to have to then have all the loot box and gambling mechanisms that a free-to-play game has. Regardless of that, Apple has implemented a rule that if you are selling a free-to-play game that has these gambling mechanisms in it, if you're going to play that on your iPhone, you now have to disclose the odds to the player of actually winning. This is a Chinese law as well that they're forcing them to do, and I believe it's one step in the right direction. Lee has been working with other states to pass legislation to crack down on these video game gambling machines. He thinks as states weigh whether to legalize gambling in light of the Supreme Court ruling, it will be a good time for them to consider what to do about loot boxes. No matter what moves forward, protecting minors and underage kids from the psychological and addictive impacts of opening up gambling in Hawaii means ensuring that those same protections apply to kids across the board, Lee said, which means having a meaningful discussion about loot boxes and other gambling mechanisms being included in kids' video games. So who would have thought that the thing that seems most dangerous to EA, Activision, and Valve and everyone else who's using these loot boxes, the most dangerous thing to their entire monetary scheme would actually be the legalization of gambling in the United States? We'll have to see how this turns out. EA obviously doesn't want to go down without a fight, but they've brought this on themselves. There wasn't any kind of attention like this. Although gamers were upset, there wasn't international attention given to this until they went too far with Star Wars Battlefront 2. They went so far that it was on the front page of every major news publication, and because of that, they brought this on themselves. And when you look at how they make their money, a majority of the money that they make is not necessarily from game sales anymore. It's from their loot boxes and microtransactions and their gambling mechanisms that they input into the games. So we'll have to see where this all goes, but let me know your thoughts. One, do you think that the gambling mechanisms in games will be shut down ever? And if you do, when will it be? Will it be this year when states start to put in rules for the legalized gambling that they're going to have going on in their states regarding sports? Do you think it might take 5 or 10 years? Or do you think the world's going to act a little bit faster and go along with the Netherlands and Belgium? Because I can tell you, once a game like FIFA, dealing with soccer, is outlawed across all of Europe, that's the main market for that game. So there'd be no incentive to put it in anywhere else. And the fact that certain countries are going to say, this is too dangerous to have in our country, it certainly wakes up regulators in other countries that are bordered to them that say, well, if it's too dangerous in your country, why would I have it in mine? So let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll continue to keep track of this here at the Systems Alliance and keep you informed as to any updates that come with this. And we'll see you soon.